Hi, welcome to Ladies Leading. I'm your host, Jessica Gendron. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I believe in the world today there are too many stories of female leaders left untold. It has become my personal mission to give those stories a microphone. Ladies Leading intends to share the real stories of female leaders on their journeys to and through leadership, so that we might gain precious insight and advice from leaders just like them. We're giving women the microphone. Welcome to Ladies Leading. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ladies Leading. Today, we have Anette Landeros on the show. Anette, I knew as a student in college at Indiana University when I was a graduate student. I got to work with her and a student group she was a leader in. And I'm so glad to have her on the show today and to share her story. So I'm going to pass the microphone to Anette and start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm, of course, Anette Landeros, and I'm currently the president and CEO of the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so we are an organization that's been around since 1973. And really, we are just charged with representing our business members. We actually have over 400 business members who we represent, and some of them are not even Hispanic. So really, it's just a great organization for entrepreneurs, either aspiring or established entrepreneurs, to connect with, to have as a resource, especially right now during COVID-19, while they're trying to traverse some challenging times.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about how you got to here. You're not that old, and that's a really awesome job to have, and quite a trajectory to where you are today. And that's one of the reasons I invited you on your show, because you impressed the snot out of me. So tell us about how you got to here where you are today.
Yeah, so very non-traditional path. So I actually, after Indiana University, there I was studying public policy, and then I actually got my MPA and continued my studies in public policy. I knew at a very young age, like about 15, which people don't think is normal, that I wanted to work for the federal government. Believe it or not, I really wanted to be a part of just everything that is involved in setting up our country for success. And so right after grad school, I did exactly that. I went to Washington, D.C. to start my career. Shortly after, I realized that I'm more of a Texas girl than I thought. So I ended up transferring with my job. I worked for the Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Transportation. And they had an office in Fort Worth. So that's really what brought me back to Texas and to Fort Worth for the first time. And when I got here, the community was really so inspiring to me that I got really active with actually women's groups, and just wanted to make new friends and give back as much as I could. And so 10 years, so my federal career was a total of 12 years, 10 of which were here in Fort Worth. And as I got more and more involved and served on different, boards of directors, I really just started to enjoy my community work. But it was always just something that I did in addition to my career. So so my path to the chamber was actually that I served on the board of directors for the chamber when our previous president had announced that he was going to be, going in a different direction to pursue a business opportunity. And so really at that point, my only thought was, okay, don't get on the search committee because it's so much work.
You're totally right.
Anyone that's been on a search committee knows that it is. And so I really had no thought about, applying or that, I would be a good fit. But it really wasn't until some of my fellow board members started to call, like one after the other, and they were just asking like, hey, have you thought about it? Have you considered? in my immediate reaction really was like, no. I actually said no quite a few times. And I told them, I've never even worked for a business. I work for the federal government. I wouldn't know what to do. I don't know why I would tell my husband, I was like, I don't know why they're all calling. And it really took, a female, one of our board members, who she called, and I didn't know her very well at that point, but I definitely respected her. And so when she called and was like, hey, have you considered, have you thought of, then I really took a moment and I said, I don't really know you that well, but I'm curious, like, what is it that you see in me and why I
Mm.
would be good for this role? And she did. She told me, all of the reasons why she thought I would be good for this role. And it took that sitting in, and even my husband just kind of being like, well, I could see how you've developed all of these leadership traits, even if it's not directly with business, but the chamber is a nonprofit. You've helped several along the way. And so it took like me letting that idea, that seedling, percolate a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and then letting it get to the stage of possibility, like letting that mental possibility start to form, that I really then was like, I think I kind of want to do this. And so after that, it was done. Like I was like submitted my written resignation. No, I did have to apply and interview and all of that. But it was very quick after I allowed myself the opportunity to explore it and to really, say like, okay, I think I can do this. That it, that it became a real thing for me.
Yeah. That I think that pivot for a lot of women is really challenging, of um being somewhere like a government job, and government jobs are good jobs and the benefits are good and it's secure work, and then pivoting to something a little bit different or totally different for some women can be challenging. Did you feel that fear at all? Like, talk to me about how you processed all of that.
Oh, absolutely. So, especially since my husband and I had been we just got married and we were trying to have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me was just like, what are we doing if I take this job? You know what I mean? And he was talking about getting his MBA at that point. And really, I'll be honest with you, we had been trying for like a year and it just wasn't working out. And so it took us kind of stepping back and being, because we had basically put everything on hold because we are like, now it's time to have a baby. Like nothing will deviate. It is baby time. And baby wasn't happening on our time. And so it really took us just saying like, okay, we need to still pursue our own goals, even if like and the family thing will come on its own, and not just stop the world and really focus on this. And so we decided, like, he enrolled in an MBA program, and then I decided and submitted my resignation and signed a contract for this job. And the second that happened, we got pregnant. And and I was like, oh no, because like you said, stability, you know what I mean? The
Mm-hmm.
benefits, stability, all of that. And I just really was like, I think that for women, we often think we have to set up the perfect landscape for you to be able to like be a mom. You know what I mean? Like you have to have, all of these things to make it work. And I was going into a very unknown and a little bit riskier kind of a situation. But, we were already we saddled up and and went for it. And I
Yeah.
really think that I actually had a lot of anxiety about it, because when I accepted the job, I wasn't pregnant. And then when I started the job, I was.
Mm.
And so I was curious about like whether people would, what would they say? Was the timing off? So it really was. There was a lot of anxiety about that career shift, to your point, because I think that we as women think that everything we have to have all of these things in order for us to be able to succeed as a mom, a wife, and a career woman.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that. New mom, new job, all at the same time. What's that like? I think a lot of, young women who are early in their careers, who are middle career, I was middle career when we adopted our kids, and
everybody's like, oh, how are you going to do it? Because they think that you have to take time off maybe to be a mom. Talk to me about what it's been like for you as a new mom and in a new role with a new organization, what that's been like.
Yeah, well, I started this role because there's a little bit of, I had delayed my start. So when I started, I was actually 2 months pregnant, but not showing. And I was like, okay, at one point I'm going to get real pregnant real fast. And so that in itself was an interesting journey because, things are so sensitive, especially, you don't want to announce and get ahead of yourself. There's as a mom, you're like, worried to jinx it, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so we really kept it to ourselves until we were 5 months pregnant. And that was our choice. And that's when I started showing. And so very quickly, I was like, I had to tell our board of directors. They were very, very, very supportive. There were several women on the board of directors that were really the ones that, they told me, they're like, okay, so you're going to do both and you're going to do it great. And you're going to, pave the way for the rest of the women who, need to see that people can do both. And so even just being super pregnant and meeting business leaders, corporate leaders, city leaders, in this new role and very pregnant very quickly, that in itself was an experience. But I decided to own it, you know what I mean? And I think it was that seedling again that was planted of like, you're going to do this and show everyone that it can be done. And then I just owned that. I was like, that's right. I'm going to be walking in, just waddling in here and we're going to get to business.
I love
and
it.
and I let nothing slow me down. Luckily I felt fine and great and worked all the way up until I gave birth, and didn't allow any, I didn't stop taking meetings. It was never a topic of conversation. I went to happy hour and had water with, and with different folks, and so did it all, you know what I mean? And I think that it was fine. I think half of the struggle was in my head. You know what I mean? And I think that that's really the reality of women. Half of the struggle is in our own heads. And I tell this to a lot of folks that it's because society has put all of these ideas in our head. And even somebody like me, who's like a strong feminist that's constantly uplifting and encouraging and telling women that we can do it. When I found those ideas seeping into my head and really messing with me, then I was like, that's incredible, because here I am, the words that come out of my mouth aren't matching the ones that were in my head when I was the one in the position. You know what I mean? And so that just tells you, I really just told myself, man, those thoughts and those expectations are so deep in there, you don't even realize it. But overall, the experience as a new mom has been great. I have a fantastic supportive partner. It's COVID-19. Baby comes to work on Mondays and Fridays for half days. You know what I mean? He has a playpen right over there. And he comes to work. And that's really that. We just have to roll with it. It's the current situation. And everyone, understands, and I just have to do what's right for my family, but still, I'm still able to kick butt in my role too.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think also what you shared about like just rolling with it, figuring it out and doing what's right for your family. I think sometimes women struggle with that decision of maybe succumbing to pressures that they don't want to succumb to because they're afraid to say no or set hard boundaries for their family because, society's taught us that that's a weakness. Men don't say no when they're asked to attend a late night meeting, where women have to think about, okay, who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to make dinner? How are we going to get so-and-so to dance class and all of that stuff?
Absolutely. And, I take mainly early coffee meetings. I do a lot of that. I think that's absolutely something that is, you can, if you get invited to something that's late, even let's meet up for drinks, be like, I actually have a commitment, because it is a commitment. Yep. Family is a commitment. Totally. I have a commitment. How about coffee on XYZ days? And you know what I mean? And you just roll with that. But yeah, it's definitely just, I think it's a confidence thing. I think that we all have expectations as women, you want to please, you know what I mean? But you have
Mhm.
to realize that at a certain point, time with you, like meeting with you, is also important, you know what I mean? And so that person will be flexible in negotiating what is the right time for you as well.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about how you see leadership as a female. You know, you've worked for the government. You're in this role now for several years. What's leadership look like for you?
Yeah, so in my previous role with the government, I was actually the only female in my office for a long time, and well, almost the entire time. And so that was really interesting because that's where I really started to manage people. And I'm very grateful because even though that was probably a very challenging space to learn how to manage and lead people,
Mhm.
luckily I had plenty of training, there was a lot of support, and so I felt really like it was, if there was also a lot of pushback, you know what I mean, there's definitely some near retirement age men who do not want to be managed by a very young female, you know what I mean. um and so that was a challenge, of course, but I always, I told myself, like, well, this is my job now. It is my job to manage you. It is my job to lead you. So, regardless, we're going to have to figure this out. And so, in terms of just, leadership, my thoughts on it is that it's actually, I know that there's always like, are you born with it or is it something like a skill you can hone? I think it's both. I think
Mm,
everyone is actually born with some type of leadership style. And I think that leadership style has to be honed. You know what I mean? The term natural born leader is
mhm.
fantastic. And for those that, are natural born leaders, kudos, you know what I mean? Kudos if you were born with that. Some people are really good at, sports, and some people are really good at leading. But I do think that it's something you have to very purposely work on, because you're leading people who are not like you. You're leading people who have different learning styles, different communication styles. And I think that leading people means you have to adjust to be able to be effective with each person. And so that is
Yeah.
something that I spent a lot of time in, because I was in a work environment where each one of them was their own little challenge. So I got
Mhm.
to learn the flexibility of,
Yeah.
learning how people need to be led. But it's definitely something that, it's a skill that needs to be worked on. It's kind of like, fitness. It's a muscle you have to really engage and you have to hone.
I love that. I love that. I think everybody wants this really prescribed definition of what leadership should be. And I think what I love about you, what you shared was, you have to adapt it to every single person because every single person has to be led in a different way. I love that you said that. I love that. Okay, so let's talk about lessons learned throughout your career. What are some of those big lessons that you feel like you've learned along the way?
I've definitely learned the value of authenticity.
Mm,
I think that often, when we enter the workforce as bright, young, crisp, right out of school or whatever situation you're in, you really feel like, okay, now is my time to, in a lot of places, that mentality is still there. Like you have to work your way up. You have to, you have to really get in there and please. And I
mhm.
think that to a certain, a certain degree, yes, absolutely, you need to do the work. Absolutely, you need to, make sure that you're learning what the style of the workplace is and that you're meeting and thriving in that style as well. But I think that along the way, I learned that there is such value in authenticity. That whole thing about every team member being different, and that there's actual value in that. You know what I mean? And so once I recognize that I bring very different value to the table, and I have certain expertises and I have certain strengths, then I was able to kind of live in that space and be really authentic of, like, okay, here's what I do well. Let me share this with the team. Let me, bring that value to the table. And then the recognizing your weaknesses. I think that that's equally as important for a leader, to recognize what isn't your best, your best strength, and working on that, or getting people to help you with those. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm behind on my emails, so there's someone who helps me. She literally reads all
Same.
my emails.
I love that.
And you just have to, when you're, I think as women, sometimes when you don't do everything perfectly, you just beat yourself up, right? Like, oh my God, I didn't answer that and it's been 2 weeks. Oh my God. Like, you got a lot going on, girlfriend. You know what I mean? So get some help with your emails, or just, apologize and move on. Everyone gets behind, and don't beat yourself up about it. Just, be really authentic about who you are and what you're doing.
I love that. There's something else buried in what you said that I think has been a really common theme in the conversations I've had with women in this series. And it's that awareness piece, of like, it's not just about being yourself. It's also having an awareness to what you do well and also where your weaknesses are. Because I think that those two things like really have to lock together. And I love that it was buried in there, but I love that. Okay. So lessons you talked about. Tell me about the challenges, right? Government job. You said you were the only female for a while, for most of your career. Talk to me about what those challenges have been for you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that along the way, there was definitely a time where it was a little bit more difficult for me to get taken seriously, or I felt like people weren't taking me seriously, especially, early on in my career. I think, my previous role, we did auditing. And so here we go into, a room, and we start questioning people who've been doing their job for 30 years about like how they do it, and, whether they did it correctly and all of that. And so really, there's a lot of rooms that I sat in where I think that they just kind of looked at me and were like, okay, she's, some ditzy young person who doesn't know what she's talking about. Or at least that's how it felt, like a little bit condescending, you know what I mean? And so at first it was, I think that some of that can seep in and you're just like, oh dang, do I really know what I'm talking about? But very quickly you realize like I work really hard, you know what I mean? And I do my homework. And so when I do walk in, I absolutely know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? And so really just owning that space and walking in more confidently. And, if I didn't get something right, I doubt you get everything right all the time. You know what I mean? So let's just move on. And so really, I think that, that sometimes, when you're young, when you're a young female, even more, being able to walk in and command a room or command respect is often a challenge, but it's definitely doable. I think that it definitely starts with, the energy that you have yourself, when you walk in, and just feeling like you belong in the room that you're in, and being able to own that.
Yeah. Do you feel like some of that is, again, that story we write in our own head, or, and some of that is, you said some of that can seep in. I think a lot about the imposter syndrome that I felt early in my career, where I'd sit in a room and I'm like, I am not qualified to be here. Like, who let me sit in this room? So do you think some of that is the story we write for ourselves and some of that's real, or what's your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a combination. I think that there needs to be more people in certain rooms that are welcoming and making space for other people. You know what I mean? I try to be that person now. I try to be that person where if I feel like somebody is kind of too quiet, or if they're, just reserved or feel uncomfortable, then I'm going to start talking directly to that person. And the conversation at the table is going to start including that person. And I'll make sure that that person's in, you know what I mean? So I do think that there is space for us as, as participants to be able to make space for people. But I absolutely agree that the imposter syndrome and those thoughts do seep into your head. Um, but as long as and this is what I tell everyone that I've worked with, even as a new person on the team, fresh set of eyes, that's valuable. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
everybody brings value to the table. It's just figuring out what that person's value is. And so I think that when it does seep in, or it did seep in, I finally started to realize like what my value was. And I just started to lead with that. But yeah, absolutely. There's definitely times that you look around and you're the only person, the only female half the time, me.
Hmm.
You're only, minority, absolutely, also me. And then also young, you know what I mean? And also like, somewhat, fashionable, which people may look down on. Because they're just like, oh, she just spent the morning curling her hair. Well, yes, I did. And I also fed my baby. And I also.
Hmm. You're like, I did all of these things and curled my hair, right?
Yes,
I love it.
exactly. It's just one of the many things that I do.
Yeah.
And so I think that it definitely seeps in, but we as women can, be aware of how that has felt for us in the past, and make sure that when we sense that there's somebody, even a young man, you know what I mean, that's sitting
Hmm.
there and potentially shrinking into their chair, like, make space for that person.
I love that. I had a similar conversation about the being overly female or presenting overly female, being in dresses or being in high heels or having your hair done, and how you know, how women are interpreted and perceived differently because of those things, and how you really do have to own it. Yeah, I love that. Okay. What advice would you give to women?
I guess my biggest advice is to allow yourself to explore um, all of your potential. You know what I mean? I
Mm.
think that often we're on a path, or what we think is the path, and we're trying to balance all of the things, and you feel like some of my potential is great, but I don't necessarily need to explore it, because I also have these, I have family, or I have, personal things that I need to compromise. And absolutely, if you do, then, and that's what's right for you, do it. But I think that allowing yourself the space to explore all of your potential, all of your talents, all of your, curiosities about potential career paths, just, allow it to grow in your mind for a little bit, rather than telling yourself like, no, now's not the right time for that additional degree. Now's not the right time to switch jobs. Now's not the time to, seek a promotion, because that's more responsibility, and that might nudge the ship a bit at home, or whatever it may be. But I think that it's just important to allow yourself the mental space to explore it, to let that grow, and see if that's something that you would like for yourself. And then if so, then you know start talking to your circle about it. You know what I mean? Talk to your partner, talk to your friends, talk to your family about, like, hey, this is something that I really think I would like to do. And then let it just grow into fruition. I think that that's super
Mm.
important. And I try to me, and what inspires me, and what really the the thought that I always maintain is that, when I leave this earth, I want to, feel like I left all of the talent that God gave me here. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
so that's something that I really try to live by, and try to just push myself in ways that make me happy, and keep me energized. I think energy is so important.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's such a valuable insight, and that because I think there's so much that we tell ourselves about, oh no, I can't do that, or oh no, they're like these limiting beliefs that we have about our career journeys, our life, our balance, our potential, all of those things. And that, so much of what you've talked about is like letting things sit and entertaining those ideas. And I love that about your story and your path of just, you know, really allowing it to grow in your mind, as you said. I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. And I think it's important because I think sometimes we just shut it down. We're like, no, I'm not going to even entertain that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now that I've done the mommy and CEO thing all simultaneously, I'm like, what's next? Come on, bring it.
I know.
Like, harder than that.
You're like, what else can I add here? This feels fine. I got this. I love it. I love it. Okay. Last question. One skill or trait that you think is critical to a woman's success?
Ooh,
The hard part is one.
I know. Yeah. Let's see. One. And I've already talked about authenticity, which I think is an important one. Gosh, that's hard. One of many, but I think that really just being very, I don't know if it's self-awareness, but being really in tune with yourself. And really, you know, exploring what's right for you, being, you know what I mean, as an individual, because there's so many people who like will probably watch this and be like, oh my God, change jobs and be pregnant. Like, I never want to do that. And absolutely, you're right. It's not the easiest thing to do. And it's not something that I, you know, prescribe to everyone. But I definitely think that each person being very self-aware and taking the time to understand what is their goals and their, you know, personal energizing vision is important, because I think that there is no prescribed way to be a leader. There's no prescribed path. There's no prescribed title. You don't have to have president, CEO in your titles for you to be a leader. And you don't have to, you know, you don't even have to be interested in that. You know what I mean? If you're a leader in your home, that is awesome and the hardest job ever. Kudos to you. You know, and so I think that the definition of a female leader is broad and it varies. And for each of us just to, you know, be able to be very introspective in identifying what's right for us. And I think for the majority of the time, what a lot of folks are just trying to say is what's right for you, go do that to the best of your abilities, to the point where you are fulfilled, and the rest of us are going to be right behind championing you.
I love that. I think that's such good advice. You know, that self-awareness piece has been a theme in the series, but I think the way that you've sort of talked about it, that your path will be your path and everybody's path is going to be a little bit different. And I think for women, I know I do. I play the comparison game so much, and I have to check myself so many times when I start to look at, oh man, she's doing that. I want to do that. Or, oh man, she's doing that. You know, like, I'm happy for her. And I think that success is incredible. But then I'm like, I am a waste of space. What have I been doing with my career? Or, you know, I get into that comparison game and I forget, like, my path is my own. And while I may want things that other people have done in their career, that it will take a different journey than maybe theirs did. And I think that piece of what you shared is powerful.
Yeah. And as women, we just want everyone to, I mean, that's what I want for everyone. I want everyone to feel that they're at their best at whatever it is that they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And whatever that may be, that is what you should do. For those that stay, you know, in federal employment, go be the best. You know what I mean? Because I did for 12 years, and that was what was right for me. And you know, whatever is right for each person, that is what is, you know, what we want for you. We want you to be the best of you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for being here today. I took 3 pages of notes. I don't know if I took so many notes. You said so many good things. Thank you so much, Annette, for being on the show. I'm so glad that I got to chat with you and have you here today. For those of you watching at home, thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us next time as we pass the microphone to another female leader. Make sure to check out ladies-leading.com, where you can see past episodes and also nominate a woman to be on our show. Thanks all.
Ever since I met Anette in college, I have always been so impressed with her. And I think that one of the things that has always impressed me about Annette is her confidence. It sort of just oozes out of her in a really natural and authentic way. And I think that's one of the really important lessons of her episode that I want to point your attention to. She talked a lot about self awareness and she talked a lot about authenticity. And I know I've said this before in other episodes, but confidence really comes at the intersection of self awareness and authenticity, that is where we really truly find confidence. And I think, one of the things I've always really admired and been impressed by Annette is just her ability to be very confident. And that comes from, as you saw in her episode, her really great self awareness, but also this authenticity that oozes out of her as well. The other thing that I think is really important that I want to point to about Annette is just this idea of being someone who is what I would call an inclusive leader, someone who thinks intentionally about setting an example for others, opening doors for others, including others, and being really intentional about understanding the differences that people come to the table with and how we have to uniquely lead each of those individuals. But I first want to talk about, this intersection of self-awareness and authenticity and confidence. Annette said at one point in the episode, and I thought it was so beautiful, I want to put it on a quote on the wall. She said, "There is such value in authenticity." And I agree. I think it's one of these really important things, particularly for us as female leaders, to really to do the work about and to learn and become aware to what it really means for us to be authentic in leadership and authentic in our work. Because I think there's so much of us that tries really hard to be perfect. And imperfection is inauthenticity or disingenuousness. And so I don't know if either of those are words, but I just made them words. But I think that, there is such value in authenticity to Annette's point, because in that authenticity, it allows us to lead better. It allows us to have a better understanding of our own strengths and weaknesses, which I think Annette does in a really incredible way. She said, "I bring certain value to the table. Here's what I do well, and let me share that with the team." But she also referenced, we all have our weaknesses too, and understanding what isn't my best strengths or what I don't do well is really important as well. And there's lots of moments in the episode where she talked about authenticity and she talked about this level of self-awareness, knowing what she does well, knowing what she doesn't do well, and knowing who she is. And I think that is what makes her come across so confident, because she is confident, because she understands who she is and she understands how to be it. But she's also in this sort of constant reflective and introspective state where she's evaluating what those things are for her and what those things might mean for her as a leader. And I think that that's one of the things that if you weren't paying attention, you might have missed it. And you might have left that episode thinking, wow, she's really confident. She's really sure of herself. And it's important to say that, but it's also important to understand why she's confident and why she's sure of herself. And it's because she does the work to become really self-aware and does the work to really understand what authenticity means and to be that person for herself. And I think that is what I love about her. But I think that confidence, that self-awareness and that authenticity also allows her to understand how to set boundaries better in her work and how to understand, she said a couple of times, we're going to roll with it. And I think
when you have self-awareness and when you have authenticity, you know how to do those things better because you know what you need, and you know what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, and you can make those decisions in a really assured way because you have those things. And I think that that's what is great about her confidence, is that it allows her to make some of those decisions in a really assured way, and to own those decisions, to own her strengths, to own her weaknesses, to own her decisions, whether it's to be a mom or to bring her kid to work or to go to a happy hour pregnant, or to say no to a late night meeting. You know, all of those decisions are deeply rooted in understanding who she is and what's important to her. And I think that that's one of the things that I loved about this episode. The other thing that I think is really beautiful about Annette's episode is this idea of, you know, in my opinion, being what I call an inclusive leader. And for me, you know, there was this moment where she said, leading people who are not like you, who have different learning styles, different communication styles, leading people's means you have to adjust and be able to be. Let me start that over. She said, leading people who are not like you, who have different learning styles, communication styles, leading people means you have to adjust to be able to effectively lead each person. And I think that that is a tiny little piece of what it means to be an inclusive leader. Inclusive leaders understand that we, one, can't make judgments and assumptions about the people that we are leading, and that we also have to understand that every single person we're interacting with has to be led in different ways, that they have their different communication styles, they have their own learning styles, they have their own culture and experiences that that impact how they interpret and process and see the world and see the work in different ways. And a good leader, a good inclusive leader, understands that that you have to navigate between different people's styles and different people's experiences. The other thing that I think is what makes Annette a really inclusive leader, she said, everybody brings value to the table. It's just figuring out what that person's value is. And I think that that's such an important point of really looking at every person and understanding that they are valuable and that they bring value to the table. You know, at one point she said, new person on the team, that's valuable. And, you know, a lot of people wouldn't look at it with that perspective, but she did. And I think that that's one of the things that I think is really cool about her and her leadership style. You know, the last thing that I think was really important is, you know, when we asked about the leadership styles, and she said there needs to be more people in certain rooms that need to be welcoming and make space for others. I try to be that person. I try to make space for other people. And I think that that's the true idea of what an inclusive leader is to understand that our job as inclusive leaders is to make space for underrepresented or new voices at the table, that we can try to represent those voices as ourselves. But what is more valuable is to allow those voices to be heard at the table and to make space for those individuals to show up there. And I think Annette alluded to that and explicitly said that in a number of ways. And, you know, this idea of inclusive leadership came up in season 1 when we talked to Anna Galladay. And I think that it bears repeating that, you know, this is a type of leadership that we need right now. Someone who's willing to make space for others at the table and to allow divergent and different voices to be heard, and to understand that each individual brings their own unique value to the table. And if we're going to be great leaders, particularly great inclusive leaders, we seek to find what those valuable traits and experiences and skills are. I loved talking to Annette. I hadn't talked to her in years, and it was great to see her. I thought she was such a great episode. The last little thing I want to point to is, you know, Annette talked a lot about having women who pushed her and challenged her and maybe encouraged her to take on a new role at the Chamber of Commerce. And she pointed to women who maybe touched her career in a certain way. And I think that we're seeing that trait of having female mentors or female allies or female advocates in our careers among the younger women that we are talking to. We didn't see a lot of it in season one from maybe some of the more seasoned female professionals that we had talked to, where a lot of them talked about not having female mentors or allies, maybe having some male mentors or allies, but really not having a lot of female allies in that regard. But as we talk to some younger women in season two, I think we're really seeing that in their generation, we really are having more female mentors and allies and sponsors who are willing to push us and challenge us and support us to advance in our career journeys. And I think, when Anette shared her journey to where she is today, I think that was really evident that there were some women that played an important role in challenging her to think about her next career step. And I think you'll see that among many of the season two interviews as well. So thank you all for joining us on this episode of Ladies Leading. Make sure you check out ladies-leading.com for more episodes and also to nominate a woman to be on our show. Also want to thank our sponsor, the Center for Leadership Excellence. We're actively working to make workplaces great places for women to work. We'll see you next time as we pass the microphone to another female leader.